Are crypto, AI, or decentralized apps and other blockchain projects starting to break through your decision selection? And I was really fascinated by what you said at the beginning, in the introduction about how what is starting here now has actually been the liquidity overseas has actually been a little easier that way. Can you talk about that, Simon, again? Kind of describe that, because as someone who looks at just the U.S. market, I had no idea about that.
Yeah, I came to Silicon Valley, to do a speech in about 2008, 2009, and I was talking about e-payment systems and e-commerce and how shopping malls were going to get wiped out and banks would start losing money. And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. But to me, that was normal. I stopped carrying cash and credit cards in about 2005 in China. Right. So they were so far ahead of the game initially with WeChat and then Alipay. So, they have a very different system there, but the systems ultimately came here. And it's the same with the whole of the digital space. We were doing tokens and cryptocurrency back in 2012, 2013 over in Asia. And we were raising money via issuing tokens from about 2015. So we've been doing fundraisings digitally now for nearly 10 years in a way that hasn't been allowed here because the regulations are significantly restricted. And it's a game changer in terms of raising money for high-risk projects in high-risk markets, like the emerging markets where we operate. If you're doing a $5 million fundraise for a small business in Southern Africa, that's just not possible through conventional fundraising. But if you're issuing a token, you're going out to Joe Public, to billions of people around the world through social media, with a big caveat saying, look, we're going to give technology for farmers to be able to grow food. Chances are you're going to lose money, but do you really care that much? This is a way of getting good stuff done. It's an incredible efficient way of doing things, which I think ultimately will come here, and it'll change the way a lot of fundraising is done.
Appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, great. The question, Xander.
Yes, Simon, can you tell us about some of the token products that you're working on?
Yeah, it varies from very small high risk to physical infrastructure. So the US has already started with tokenization of real estate. So you've seen REITs effectively getting tokenized. But one of the projects we're doing on at the bigger scale now is building power stations in places like Africa and warehouses where we build 50 to 100 warehouses issuing a token so that you've diversified the risk and given liquidity. So we're effectively securitizing future cash flows.
How much turnover? Let's say someone invested in that, just curiosity's sake. How does someone how much turnover in the actual token, or how much liquidity is there really, overseas in that way?
It's like doing a normal share issue here. If you go out and you market it and you actually work hard, you get liquidity. You can sit on NASDAQ, but if you never do any PR and never marketing and you've got a boring story, you don't have liquidity. So it's all down to the quality of the company. If you've got a company that's continually raising money, doing things, then it gets liquidity. If it's something like the tokenized real estate, obviously there's less liquidity because people don't tend to turn over real estate that much.
Gary and I were talking earlier about the secondary market as a liquidity source in the U.S. Do you mind?
Yeah, it's growing and growing and growing, and we can look to none other than the federal government for encouraging private markets, because public markets are overregulated and too complicated. 10 years ago, when we started investing, later stage companies were marketing their securities to people like Fidelity, Susquehanna, and those securities were so complicated, nobody could figure out what it was. So therefore, you couldn't invest in a later stage company because they were too complicated. You wouldn't have the information. Now what's happened, you can see with companies like Epic Games, SpaceX, is they have a very small or zero preference stack. So it opens up the market to anyone who has dollars to spend. And not only that, there's a growing list of brokers now in the dozens, where maybe 10 years ago there was a couple, and you can go buy SpaceX tomorrow. You call up a broker in Toronto and off you go. And that's something new, and that's one of the reasons why value continues to be grown in the private markets. And that's why it's important for family offices to participate in private markets. That's both on the debt side and equity.
Oh, sure, Isaac.
Yeah, just quickly, obviously, companies are staying private longer and people want their money back. So it creates opportunity for secondaries. But, again, I think it's going to be an interesting few years just in terms of who raises a second fund or a third fund, what valuations end up being on the secondary market side. It's just a lot of integrated, interesting components going on, just from secondaries to new funds being raised and liquidity. So we'll see what happens.
Great.
Just one further comment on that, because I think the secondaries is very important, particularly if the markets do come off. But I think if you look at what's happening in the digital space and then track back to the financial markets history. So you used to have the stock exchange, highly regulated, all the securities laws, and then people came up and said, hey, why don't we do options and futures? Because it's not regulated. So you had then the options market getting set up in the 90s, everybody, and the liquidity started there. Now, it didn't replace the conventional market. It was a new product alongside it. And I would see digital as a parallel thing. It's a new way of doing financial tools, making money, trading stuff, which will run alongside the existing financial system.
Thank you, Simon.
If you are a founder, raising capital, developing real estate, or you're an investor, would love for you to get involved in the Family Office Club. I've run this community for 18 years now. We've hosted 300 live events. We have 17 million social media group members and followers. We have the #1 YouTube channel on family offices. We have the #1 most popular podcast on family offices. You can learn more about us and our membership options at familyoffices.com. We have 30 in-person events planned in 2026 and another dozen events this year. Please go to familyoffices.com to learn more.